Dark clouds filled the sky and shrouded the docks in a grim, grey shade. A storm had long since passed, but the workmen were on the edge of another approaching, as they scrambled around a recently docked ship, carrying some very important cargo. Everyone was working quickly, and there was no time to dawdle. However, the intense hustle and bustle didn't dampen the spirits of a cheerful little green engine. Luke sat on the deck excitedly. The trip across the sea was a long one, but finally, he was here. The island of Sodor, a place he had always dreamt of going to. He had heard the stories of the engines that worked here, and was always left inspired by them. It became an ambition in his life to one day have an opportunity to travel there, to see the engines and their railways. And now, that dream had come true. Now, Sodor was his home. He was there, as he was needed to work in what was known as the Blue Mountain Quarry. This only made Luke's excitement even stronger. It sounded important. Luke eagerly looked around the ship. He wasn't the only engine on board. There was a yellow one on the opposite track to his own. When Luke was loaded onto the ship, the engine attempted, what he assumed, to be a greeting of some kind. But it was in a language he did not understand. He didn't mind though. Perhaps once they're on firm rails, they'll find a way to communicate. Perhaps they will become good friends. At this moment, however, Luke was more concerned about getting off the ship. He wanted more than ever to reach his new railway and give his wheels a much needed stretch. He watched the workmen approach him in the yellow engine. Luke saw his chance.
Take me off first! Please! Please!
The workmen looked over to him. They wanted to get the yellow engine off first, but they could see the eagerness on Luke's face and knew there was no point in arguing, nor was there really any time. And so they agreed. Like a young giddy child, Luke's eyes widened up at the crane hook, lowering down to collect him. Once attached and secured, Luke was lifted up into the air and slowly moved towards a waiting flatbed. His spirits rose higher and higher. Soon he would be on the last stage of his journey, and soon afterwards he would be at his new home with new friends to make and a new, exciting, important job. Suddenly, Luke felt a hard bump on his buffer beam. He looked down, and to his horror, there was the yellow engine, a clear dent in its top lamp, rolling backwards towards the edge of the ship. Workmen cried and shouted, but no one could help in time. They all stared as the engine approached the edge and disappeared over the side. Luke was in a complete daze. He stayed in one during his journey to the works, and even during his time there. Nothing seemed to get him out of it. He was checked and inspected for any damage, but he paid no attention. Not even the thunderous storm outside had an effect. There was only one thing clouding his mind. That yellow engine. That engine who fell into the ocean. That engine that was pushed into the ocean. That he pushed into the ocean. Luke felt very sick. He hadn't seen the engine since he left the docks, and could only fear the worst. Was he still in the sea? Was he pulled out? Could he be pulled out? There was not a single answer. Just then, he heard a whistle. His eyes widened as a standard gauge saddle tank steamed into the works, pushing a flatbed with a haunting sight on top of it. Luke immediately recognized it. It was the yellow engine, only now he was in a very sorry state. His entire bottom half was a dirty, damp green, and his body had rusted. Luke had never seen such a sight. The workman walked around the yellow engine, inspecting him closely. Luke could hear them talking, but couldn't make out any words. Finally, they stopped and had a meeting next to the cab. Then, one of them began shaking his head, looking very dismayed. Luke didn't know why, but he knew it couldn't be good. The same man then approached another group of workers that were nearer to Luke. This time, the words were clear.
I'm afraid this engine cannot be saved. Not fit for work at all. There is only one thing that can be done.
Luke's heart sank. Tears began to build in his eyes. The engine was going to be scrapped, and it was his fault. He tried to look away in shame, only to find another grim sight in front of him. An engine casted in shadows with Luke's very shape. It stared back at him with glowing white eyes and a wide, devilish frown.
Look what you could have done. It's all your fault.
Luke's eyes shot open. The little engine gasped for air frantically and tried to compose himself after what he had endured. At last, his breathing began to steady, and he slowly managed to start thinking straight. He was no longer in the works, with the storm raging outside. He was in his cozy little shed at the Blue Mountain Quarry. There were no workmen around, nor a yellow engine that was about to meet a terrible fate. It was just him. Luke gave an exhausted sigh. It happened again. Another nightmare. Another memory creeping its way into the forefront of his mind. He didn't understand why this kept happening to him. It had been a few months now since Luke's name had been cleared, all thanks to a particular blue tank engine. He learned that the yellow engine, the one he believed was scrapped, was still alive. His name was Victor, and he lived at the steamworks at Craven's Gate. Luke didn't fully know how to describe it, but for the first time in a long time, he was truly happy. And yet, his mind still felt drained from the endless torture he was feeling within. Not of what did happen, but what could have happened. After all, what could have happened was what he believed did happen for so many years. So much of his life had been spent hiding and running away into the mines and tunnels of the quarry, with the miners and little engines being the only ones aware of his presence. They were all kind and respectful, and Luke couldn't ask for more supporting friends. But his thoughts still dwelled on what might have occurred. And it wasn't just past experiences. This has affected him in the present. As he went about his work, thoughts of something going wrong would flash before him. More often than not, they manifested themselves before him as visions, and he would watch the horrifying events play out. And every time it would happen, he would do anything to prevent it. A few days ago, he was approaching a tight curve near one of the cliffs. As soon as he noticed it, A vision played in front of him, where he leapt off the curve and tumbled down the cliff face. Luke quickly reduced his speed and went over the curve slowly, avoiding a deadly end. It had been a habit of his for several years. A habit that seemed impossible to break from. Luke wearily moved around the quarry the next morning. Sleep didn't return to him after the nightmare, so he was slow to start. No matter how hard his driver encouraged him, Luke went at a drowsy pace. As the hours went by though, and as more workmen arrived for work, and as more machines roared into action, Luke started to wake up and became more lively. Or at least, that was his outside appearance. So many times did he consider telling his friends about it. It would be the natural thing to do. They did after all keep him a secret for so long. But this wasn't the same. How could his friends help him stop seeing these visions? Would they even try to help him? Perhaps they would think he was being silly, and say he should just try to ignore it. As if he hadn't tried that already. Luke dwelled on these distressing thoughts as he pushed some trucks into a siding.
Hello, Luke.
The little engine looked up, surprised at the very unexpected sight of the Thing controller. Very rarely did he travel up here. Whatever he was here for must be important.
Hello, sir.
How have you been getting on, Luke? Haven't checked on you in a while.
I've been doing good, sir.
Luke smiled broadly, hoping that slight stutter didn't warrant suspicion.
That's good. Now, I wanted to see you because I have an important job for you. One that'll take you out of the quarry.
Luke was left a little startled. Out of the quarry?
What would that be, sir?
I understand your performance here has been superb, even long before I knew of you. But recently, I think it's high time we test your versatility.
My versatility?
To see how well you can perform in other areas besides the quarry.
You mean like other goods trains or Rusty's maintenance trains, sir?
Well, in due time, perhaps. But now, passenger trains are what I want to see you on.
Suddenly, Luke felt very pale. It was as if he had instantly been shrouded in the grips of a wintry air.
Huh? Passengers? But, sir, I've never pulled passengers before.
I'm well aware of that, Luke, which is why your first trains won't be alone. I've arranged to have you double head with Scar Lowy. If you falter in any way, he'll be right there by your side.
And in that moment, the winter air vanished, and Luke once again felt the warm breeze of the sun. He wasn't going to be alone.
Thank you, sir. I think I could do it.
Excellent. You shall start tomorrow. Once your work here is done, you can go to the sheds at Croven's Gate to spend the night. Goodbye, Luke.
With that, the Thing controller walked off, leaving Luke to continue his duties. For a brief moment, he felt at ease. There was a small bit of nervousness, but the thought of Scar Lowy, the oldest of the railway's fleet, being there with him, made him feel relaxed. That being said, it didn't stop Luke from gulping when in the corner of his eye he spotted the shadowy shape of an engine, one with glowing, nightmarish eyes. Luke tried to look away and focus on his jobs, but no matter where he was, he knew he couldn't escape it. He was watching him.
You will fail, you know. You will fail, Luke. There's no denying that.
As Luke shunted his last set of trucks, the sun was already low and a shadow began to slowly cast over the quarry. Peter Sam was the only other engine around, and both had agreed to go to the sheds together. Luke made his way to the turntable, where they had planned to meet. As he got closer, however, there was something that seemed very out of place. Among all the grey and blue of the quarry was a bright form of yellow. An engine, a tender one by the looks of it, puffing slowly away with a loaded train. Luke stopped by the turntable, where Peter Sam was waiting.
Peter Sam, who was that yellow engine?
Yellow engine? Oh, yes. That was Molly. She's filling in for Paxton for a few weeks.
Oh dear, did Paxton have another accident?
Goodness no. He was needed at Brendam Docks. Apparently it's gotten very busy there lately. And the dockside shunter needed some help.
Oh, I see. So why is Molly filling in instead of someone like Thomas?
Probably because he has his own branch line to work on, silly. Not only that, but recently there's been a huge order of stone from the mainland, so a big engine is needed. Anyway, come on, let's go home.
Okay, Peter Sam.
Soon, the two engines were on their way, and had a clear path all the way to Croven's Gate. The other engines had already settled down when they backed into their respective berths. They all smiled and greeted Luke warmly. He had never stayed at Croven's Gate before, so the surroundings of so many engines felt a little overwhelming.
Oh my, I haven't slept in a shed this big before.
Sir Handel perked up at this.
You think this is big? If only you could have seen the old one on Sodor. Now that was quite the size.
Skarloey frowned at Sir Handel.
So, after all these years, you're still not used to this shed?
Oh, no, of course not, Skarloey. I have grown to be quite satisfied here. So, Luke, it is my understanding that you have passenger work tomorrow?
Yes, Sir Handel. It'll be my first time, actually.
First time? You've never pulled passengers before?
Well, no. Trucks are all that I've ever really known.
Peter Sam and Sir Handel gave each other a grim look.
Well, fear not, Luke. It's the first time for everyone at some point. I will help you for however long it takes for you to get adjusted. The main ingredient is smooth running. Not too fast nor slow, just the right speed for the passengers.
Well, in my experience, Luke, it's the coaches that are your main concern. No matter what you do, they'll find anything to complain about. Tricky is what I'd call them. Why, not long after Peter, Sam, and I arrived, do you know what they did to me? Shoved me right off the track. All because I stopped to avoid hitting some sheep.
Oh my!
Yes, that was very careless of them. All the same, they did have their reasons, didn't they, Sir Handel?
Sir Handel blushed, and Skarloey laughed.
But remember, Luke, you will be fine if you treat them right. And as long as you are kind to them and keep a good lookout, you shouldn't have any problems.
Luke smiled genuinely. The chatter of his friends had lifted his spirits, and in a way, he was looking forward to tomorrow. That small bit of nervousness was still there, but Luke was determined to not let anything go wrong. The following morning, Luke awoke to the feeling of warmth running through his boiler. Giving a loud yawn, he looked over to see Skarloey already set to move out.
Good morning, Luke. Ready for the day?
No, yes, definitely.
Splendid. I just need to fill up on coal. Could you fetch the coaches while I do that?
Okay, Skarloey, just give me a sec.
Scar Lowy chuffed away to the coal bunker, leaving Luke to build up steam. Once that was done, Luke made his way to the carriage shed. He soon found himself surrounded by coaches of many kinds and colours. On his track was an already assembled rake, consisting of 4 blue and cream coaches and a brake van. All of them stared at the intruder. Luke suddenly felt very uncomfortable. The lead coach spoke first. "Who are you?"
I'm Luke. I'm going to be taking you out today. Come along.
He then slowly advanced on the train, making sure not to go too fast. Although having no experience with coaches, he was positive that one crucial step was coupling up to them gently. The coaches twittered anxiously to each other as the little engine buffered up to them. Once coupled up, Luke, feeling quite intense, moved slowly away towards the station. He soon arrived at the platform. The passengers were already waiting. Many took their seats, but a few stayed behind to take a look at the engine who would be pulling their train. They had never seen Luke before, and were intrigued. Luke smiled meekly, but was all the same uneasy. The coaches didn't help either. "We'll be watching you closely, little engine."
I'm really sorry. I'll do my best. There's no need to be harsh.
"We know what new engines are like. You try to pull any stunts, and we'll see to it personally that you'll regret it in an instant."
You will do no such thing.
The threatening aura of the coaches suddenly vanished as Scar Lowy backed down in front of them. Scar Lowy, I wasn't expecting you.
I will be assisting Luke today and keeping an eye on him with his first passenger train. It seems, however, that my eye may need to be directed somewhere else.
Well,
Luke wants to do the best he can, and you will let him. Any past experiences do not excuse threats of harm. Any trick on him will also be a trick on me, do you understand?
The coaches silently quivered as Scar Lowy winked at Luke.
They'll settle down once we're on the move.
Luke sighed with relief. No matter what would happen, Scar Lowy was there with him. As the last of the passengers boarded the train, the guard blew his whistle and waved his green flag. With a toot from both whistles, Scar Lowy and Luke steamed gently out of the station. The sights of houses and other buildings soon began to fade, and in their place appeared the view of green never-ending hills and tall, proud trees. Birds chirped and flew around as the 2 little engines travelled through, their pure, bright steam shooting out into the summer air. Scar Lowy chuffed along, completely unfazed by anything. To him, this would be like any other journey. Luke found himself on edge. His eyes darted from side to side, looking for anything that seemed out of place. Anything that could harm him, Scar Lowy, or the train. Everything looked fine. Everything seemed normal. It wasn't long before the train made its first stop, Krosny-Kurin. As a small selection of passengers disembarked, Scar Lowy took the opportunity to look back. Luke had been silent the whole time, not making any effort to ask questions, or even have an ordinary chat.
How are you doing, Luke?
Well, so far so good. I guess.
Yes, indeed, and I'll make sure we keep it that way. Ho ho.
Luke managed a small smile, but as he thought more, it grew a little wider. Yes, they would keep it that way. The entire journey will go fine. As long as he concentrated at the task at hand, as long as he didn't dread himself with harrowing thoughts, they would get the train to every required stop and back. Of course, that was easier said than done, but it wasn't impossible. The guard's whistle was once again heard, and the 2 engines set off.
Come on! Miles to go before we sleep.
The environment began to change. The trees and open fields were mostly gone, and in their place stood a smooth, straight river leading to a bridge. Just before that was a road that the line had to cross. On the opposite side of the river stood a long set of immense mountains. Luke was left a little surprised. It was the last thing he was expecting. He looked slowly up, his eyes greeted by the unfriendly looking mountaintops. It got him thinking.
Is it safe to travel through here?
How do you mean, Luke?
Well, isn't there a risk of a rock slide from these mountains?
I don't think so. There haven't been any rock slides in all my years here. Truthfully, it's the roads that can be more troublesome. You may have to worry about reckless drivers or, in Sir Handel's case, clumsy steam.
Skarloey's words began to fade from Luke. His mind suddenly fixated on the mountains. He tried to look away. He tried to focus on what the old engine was saying. But it was too late. It began to happen. Before Luke's eyes played a series of events that made his heartbeat speed up intensely. A huge rock landed in front of them. Then, another fell on his cab roof. More fell, hitting the train's roof. More and more came down. The engines, their crews, the coaches, the passengers, all of them wailing in fear and pain for help. But then, in an instant, the entire train was engulfed in a huge wave of rocks.
Luke, come on, talk to me, boy. Oh, talk to... Ow! Oh!
Skarloey was unprepared for the sudden bump and frantic puffing from behind. He no longer felt like he was moving under his own power. Rather, he was being pushed.
Luke, what are you doing?
We need to get out. Oh, we need to get out. We need to get out. Come on, come on, come on!
Luke slipped fiercely, desperately pushing Skarloey and pulling the train over the crossing far away from the mountains. Even when they were safely away, he didn't stop, his mind overfilled with pure panic. Finally, his attention was brought back to reality by a furious whistle.
Luke, stop right now!
Luke's brakes came on, and after much screeching, the train stopped. What followed was the sound of quick gasping breaths. Skarloey glared back at the source.
Luke, what on earth were you doing? That was far too careless.
There was a rock slide back there. Oh, I had to get us out of here.
Rock slide? What rock slide? Luke, what are you talking about?
Luke's eyes slowly turned back to where they were. All he saw was the line, the road, and the mountains. Not a single rock had fallen.
Oh no, 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 oh no, 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 oh no, oh no, oh no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Skarloey. I thought I saw rocks falling. They were going to hit us, and I had to get us out of here.
All Luke could do was whimper, unable to fully explain his actions. Skarloey was left in bewilderment. The crews and guard quickly walked along the train, checking every single passenger in every coach. Some were okay, but others had hurt their arms and legs from being thrown around. A wave of guilt flew over Luke when he saw some of the passengers limping outside for some space. They weren't hurt to the point of needing to go to a hospital, but that didn't stop them from glaring daggers at the little green engine.
Scarloey, I don't think I could carry on. It's best that I return to the yards.
Scarloey didn't know what to say. Everything happened so fast. But there was little time to think. The train was blocking the line, so they had to carry on quickly.
Very well. I'll pull you and the train to the next siding, then once I'm on my way, you can go back.
Luke silently agreed. The crews were satisfied with the plan, and after explaining it to the passengers, they reluctantly took their seats once again, and the train continued on. The nearest siding was just outside the next station. Since Scarloey was in front of Luke, he had to move forward, allowing Luke to reverse into the siding. Then, Scarloey backed down onto the train and started off. During the operation, Luke's driver phoned the Fin controller, informing him of the situation and that Luke would be back sooner than expected. Luke was too ashamed to say anything, and looked away to avoid seeing the disappointed look on Scarloey. It was because of that, though, that he didn't notice the look of utmost concern on the old engine's face. Not since his years of hiding in the Blue Mountain Quarry had Luke shown this degree of panic. It may have just been Luke's first time pulling a passenger train. And yet, the way he was acting, the way he sounded so convinced that there was a rockslide, it was far too unusual. Scarloey couldn't think of an explanation, and it dwelled on his mind for the rest of the journey. Later, Luke limped sadly into the yards at Croven's Gate. His crew had been respectfully quiet the whole time. As he came to a stop, he saw the Fin controller waiting for him.
Sir, I know I messed up and I'm so sorry, but
I know, Luke. I know what's happened. What I don't understand, though, is why it happened. What made you think there was going to be a rock slide?
How could he explain it? He obviously knew why it happened, but how could he tell it to the Fin controller? How could someone like him understand?
I was just panicking, sir. I was just so worried about a rock slide that I had to just get out of there to get the passengers out of harm's way.
But in the end, Luke, your passengers were harmed regardless. They aren't meant to be bounced about.
I know, sir.
You're a fine engine, Luke, but I don't think you're fit for passengers. Once you're rested, I want you back at the Blue Mountain Quarry.
Yes, sir. I understand.
Luke felt his heart sinking. His one opportunity to be out of the quarry had been ruined, and a second chance was out of the question. Somberly, the Fin controller strode away. Luke could see him shaking his head in clear dismay. His crew went away too, to have a drink in a worker's hut. And so he sat there alone, with nothing but his thoughts to keep him occupied. He couldn't help but feel terrible. The fact he brought harm to those passengers was impossible to shrug off. It almost reminded him of knocking into Victor. But that was an accident, and was due to things that were beyond his control. This was far from the same. Luke could have controlled himself in that moment. He should have, but he couldn't. He couldn't shake off his fears and stress. Not that he didn't try, but it wasn't enough. It was then that Luke spotted something in one of the shed berths. He began to wince. Once again, he saw it. That demonic black void with those devilish eyes. It began to laugh. A laugh of mockery.
I told you.
Luke's eyes narrowed. He felt a sudden sense of anger from within. Why couldn't he control himself? Why was this thing always lurking around? Why does it torment him like this? Why does he torment himself like this? Then, Luke's state of anger was broken by a whistle. A whistle that felt familiar. Looking down the standard gauge line, he spotted a bright yellow shape of an engine. The same one he saw at the quarry yesterday. The engine stopped at a red signal, a long line of trucks sitting behind her, filled with stone and slate. She then looked down at the little green engine, staring up at her.
Oh, hello. You're Luke, right?
Luke blinked.
You know who I am?
Well, your name is on your tanks. But I've heard from you from Thomas. You're that engine that hid in the Blue Mountain Quarry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Molly, by the way.
The bigger engine blushed brightly. Luke couldn't help but smile. He didn't know how to fully describe it, but something felt warming about this engine.
It's nice to meet you, Molly. And yes, I am that engine.
I was shocked when Thomas told me everything about you. Especially when you pulled him from that cliff. You're certainly stronger than you look.
Not really. It was harder than it looked, but I had to do my best, of course. Especially after what he had done for me.
Luke then looked curiously up at Molly.
So, I've heard that you filled in for Paxton.
Yes, I've mostly been running between Vickerstown and the quarry. There's a large order for stone and slate on the mainland somewhere. I bring these trains to Vickerstown, and a diesel from the other railway takes them on.
Molly then paused, seemingly pondering something.
If you don't mind me asking, why are you around here? I would have expected you at the quarry. That's where you work, right?
And in an instant, Luke's rather cheerful demeanour became short-lived.
I was put on a passenger train today with Scarloey. The thing controller wanted to see how versatile I was.
Oh, that must have been fun. How did it go?
Not well.
Molly's smile dampened. She could tell Luke had become less cheery, and whatever happened with his passenger train must have been rough.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. Is it okay if I asked what happened?
Luke didn't speak for a moment, thinking his words carefully.
We were passing a set of mountains, and I thought there was going to be a rock slide, so I went fast and away from there as quickly as possible. But there was no rock slide, and I ended up hurting some of the passengers.
Oh my! Did any of them need to go to the hospital?
I don't think so.
Molly felt very sympathetic. She understood the feeling of being down after something not going as planned. However, there was something in Luke's story that she was a little puzzled about.
Why did you think that there was gonna be a rock slide? Did you hear one?
Well, no, I just panicked, that's all. I was so worried about it happening that my wheels took over my head, and the next thing I knew, I was speeding away from there.
Luke hoped Molly couldn't see through him. He liked to think he was good at hiding truths. but not at lying about them.
Ah, I see. I'm just a little surprised, especially since Skarloey was with you. Did he not try to help you?
Yes, of course he tried, but it really wasn't enough. It's really hard to explain.
Oh, I'm sorry. I hope I'm not pressuring you. I was just a little curious. That was all. Will you be okay?
At that moment, the signal dropped, and it was time for Molly to go.
I'll be fine. It was nice meeting you, Molly.
Same to you, Luke. Goodbye. I'll see you later at the quarry.
With a blast of her whistle, Molly steamed away. Luke watched her go until she was out of sight. He was left a little reflective on their conversation. It seemed Molly had a lot of curiosity for the incident. He began to feel regret over not being truthful. He now wished he had been more honest and explained the real reason why he thought there was a rockslide. That thought, however, was immediately replaced by another one. A thought that reminded him of why he lied in the first place. What good would it do? It was mid-afternoon by the time Luke reached the Blue Mountain Quarry. He couldn't help feeling a sense of relief as he saw the entrance. At least he was returning to some more familiar ground. As he approached the turntable, he saw Peter Sam and Sir Handel having a rest. Both were red-faced, but lit up when they noticed him.
Oh, hello, Luke. Back at the quarry, I see.
Hello, Peter Sam. Hello, Sir Handel.
Hardly surprised to see you back so soon, after such a stunt.
What?
Skarloey told me what happened up at Lakeside. About what happened with the passengers. Did you really surge forward like that?
No. It was an accident. Well...
I know I warned you about those coaches, but that hardly meant being intentionally rough with them. They aren't cattle trucks, you know.
Now that's quite rich coming from you.
It wasn't intentional!
An uncomfortable silence fell over the three engines. Even some workmen stopped, stunned by the sudden outburst.
Look, I don't want to talk about it, okay? But if that's all you want to talk about, then just leave me alone.
Peter, Sam and Sir Handel exchanged troubled glances. Never before had Luke shouted at them like that. A few hours passed, and Luke had managed to distract himself in trucks and quarry dust. That didn't stop everyone taking more notice of him than usual. Everywhere Luke went, he would spot a few pairs of eyes glancing at him. Luke could understand why, but that didn't remove his hate of it. Being stared down upon by so many others was the last thing he needed. So many times did he think about talking back to them, to demand for some solitude, but that would only make him a bigger target. His thoughts were interrupted, however, as a whistle echoed from the distance. Luke immediately recognized it, and a small smile appeared on his face as he spotted Molly approaching with a line of empty trucks. Her calm, peaceful demeanor was present as it was earlier. Luke then took note of the track she was on, which crossed over one of the many narrow gauge lines. Engines of both gauges always took precaution around these parts of track. In a gigantic, bustling environment such as a quarry, accidents were a high possibility at all times. It was in that moment of looking at the crossing that Luke saw something that shook him. Molly wasn't the only one approaching. On the narrow gauge line, getting closer and closer to the crossing, was the handle, charging forwards with a loaded train, seemingly unaware of the larger engine. Horrified of what was about to happen, Luke looked quickly between the two. The handle was going too fast and wouldn't stop in time. Molly, however... Luke's whistle sounded a long bellow.
Molly, stop!
Molly was startled and had no idea what was wrong, but she followed the command. Her brakes came on and she grounded to a halt, just inches from the crossing. Knowing she was now safe, Luke looked over to the narrow gauge track expectantly, only to be left bewildered. What he was sure was the sight of the handle coming towards them was now gone. The line was completely empty. Molly was very shaken, but also confused.
Luke, what's wrong?
Luke couldn't speak. He didn't know what to respond with. But after a moment of silence, he made an attempt.
I swear I saw Sir Handel. He was coming right towards you at the junction. You were about to crash into him.
Molly was now even more confused. She surveyed the narrow gauge line directly in front of her, staring down both directions.
You saw Sir Handel?
Both engines looked towards Peter Sam stopping nearby, clearly hearing and seeing everything.
Luke? Sir Handel's up there.
Luke peered up. His eyes widened, as there, crossing a bridge, was Sir Handel, hauling some loaded trucks behind him. It was then he realized it. It had happened again. Another vision, another deception, manifested in his mind. Luke glanced between the two engines, both staring at him with clear befuddlement in their eyes. The little engine felt cornered. There was no safety net, no logical explanation for his mistake, no reasonable way of describing what he saw. Or rather, what he thought he saw.
Oh, I'm sorry, Molly. I don't know what came over me. I guess I must have heard something that sounded like an engine coming down this line.
No matter his efforts, the stammering was uncontrollable. He only hoped what he got out would be enough. While Molly thought it over, to Peter Sam, it didn't make sense in any way.
Luke, you just said you saw Sir Handel, but now you're saying you just heard the sounds of an engine?
Luke gulped, a contradiction in his words being spotted. He opened his mouth to respond, but he couldn't. He then noticed that Peter Sam began to look frustrated.
Luke, what's going on? You're not acting right at all. First that incident with the passengers and now this? What aren't you telling us?
That outburst was enough for Luke to squeal. In a mere instant, he shot back, away from Peter Sam and Molly.
Luke, please wait!
But it was too late. The two engines exchanged looks, both confused and worried.
Peter Sam, has that ever happened before?
Well, Luke has run away before, several times. It always happened when a standard gauge engine showed up, like Paxton.
Oh, I didn't mean that. I mean, has he ever acted that way we just saw? As in, seen things that aren't there?
No, not that I know of.
Molly looked on. In the far distance, she could just make out the pale green shape on the siding, all by himself. At that moment, both engines received some company. It was Skarloey.
Hello, Molly. Hello, Peter Sam. Something the matter?
Could you explain it to him, Peter Sam? I'm going to see Luke.
Luke? What's this about Luke? What's wrong?
It's, well, quite odd, Scarloey.
Molly chuffed slowly away as Peter Sam began to describe what had just transpired to the old engine. Meanwhile, Luke sat in the cold, shaded siding. His mind was left in great turmoil. He knew that Peter Sam could see he wasn't being truthful. It was only a matter of time before the other engines knew too. It wouldn't be long until he would be bombarded with questions about what was really going on in his smoke box. The worst thing that could happen to him was about to happen.
Luke?
A soft, gentle voice broke through to him. He looked up and saw Molly coming to a stop in front of him. Luke felt like he was going to freeze up. He desperately looked around for an exit. Just in front of him, and behind Molly, was a tunnel that went deep into the mountain.
Please don't run away! I want to talk to you!
Luke paused in his escape plan. It seemed Molly had read his thoughts.
You want to talk?
Yes, that's all! I'm not here to hurt you.
Molly tried to give a comforting smile, hoping it would give Luke assurance. However, he only sighed.
I know you're not going to hurt me, Molly. That's not the problem at all. That's never been the problem.
So, what's the problem?
Luke didn't say anything at first. He thought hard about his words. Molly truly seemed like someone who cared for him, and that was somewhat assuring. But then, behind Molly, he could see it, that dark shadow of an engine, a cruel smirk on its face. Luke felt his eyes becoming watery, but he refused to let any tears out.
You won't understand. No one will. No one will ever understand how I've truly been feeling. No one will ever believe it. They'll just laugh at me. They'll say I'm stupid, that I'm too careless, making excuses, and even if they did believe me, no one can help it. What's wrong with me will never be fixed. It's not a burst cylinder or a loose whistle, it's far worse. Nearly every night, I'm reminded of my worst days, where things could have gone so wrong. Doesn't matter if they did or not, it still happens. I'll always see things that aren't there. I'll always think horrible things will happen, even though they never do happen. But I always fall for them. I fall for them because I dread for what would happen if I choose to ignore them. I'm sorry, Molly. I know you want to help me, and I really want help. But I know it won't do anything.
And with that, Luke fell into silence and said no more. Molly couldn't help but feel devastated. Never before had she seen someone so hopeless. As she looked closer into Luke's eyes, it was then she could see it. Whatever was wrong with him had clearly drained him. Deep down, Luke was exhausted from whatever was within him. Whatever it was had been with him for a long time, and Molly was terrified of it.
Please, just leave me alone.
Molly stayed still for a moment. Despite the request, it didn't feel right. She realized she couldn't just leave Luke like this. He didn't deserve being left alone. Being isolated was far from the best idea.
Luke, I don't know what it is you're not telling me. If you don't want to, then I won't force you to. But I'm not going to ignore you. I don't know how, but I'm going to try and help you. I know you said it won't work, but I'm not going to let that stop me. I'll leave you alone for now, but just remember that, Luke.
With that statement given, Molly slowly reversed away. Luke was left rather surprised. He expected Molly to get the message and leave him as is. Yet, she was still going to help him? Molly regrouped back with Peter Sam and Skarloey, who by now had the full story.
You were there for a while. What did he see?
Molly slowly recounted everything. Once she finished, both little engines were shocked.
I can't believe it. I can't believe Luke's felt that way the whole time.
Nonetheless, Peter Sam, that's what has happened. Poor engine, no one should ever have to suffer in such a way.
Skarloey then looked at Molly curiously.
If you are looking for ways to help Molly, there is something we can start off with.
Really? What is it?
It seems the main issue is that Luke has suffered with this in complete isolation. No one has been there for him to talk to or to support him in his turmoil. I propose that you and I stay here tonight with Luke, to give him company throughout his sleep, so should anything occur, we will be by his side, ready to talk about whatever's been troubling him.
That sounds like a good idea. I'll be happy to do that.
What about me? Do you want me to help too?
Actually, Peter Sam, I will need you in the main sheds with the others. I think it's best if it's just me and Molly here. Should anyone ask where I am, I'm doing late night work here with Luke. We shouldn't spread his troubles around mindlessly, only once we know everything. And of course, if he wants us to.
Is that a good idea, Skarloey? In my experience, lying doesn't usually end well. You remember hearing of the time Sir Handel lied about being ill, don't you?
Sir Handel lied out of laziness, we'll be lying to help our friend. There is a distinction, Peter Sam.
Well, if you insist, I won't say a thing.
Thank you, Peter Sam. You really are doing a big favour for us.
Peter Sam smiled and puffed off to continue his work.
And thank you, Molly, for your dedication. I'm sure Luke will appreciate you keeping an eye out for him.
Thank you, Skarloey. I just don't want to leave him in such a state. I only hope what we do will work.
Skarloey's smile softened slightly.
Well, I'm not expecting it to put Luke's troubles to a complete end. Sticking close to our friends can help in controlling the situation or understanding it, but it won't get rid of it.
It won't?
It was like that when us narrow-gauge engines first came to know Luke. We befriended him, we made him feel wanted. We worked by his side. Yet everything we did never removed his guilt, his shame in what he believed he did to Victor.
The old engine glumly looked to where Luke still sat, engulfed in shadow.
So, in case not everything is resolved tonight, I want you to remember that, Molly. Just so you won't be disappointed.
Molly completely understood. With that, both engines went away to their respective jobs, leaving Luke to his solitude. The light in the sky began to darken, and the air grew colder. Molly was making her way from Vickerstown after making her last delivery for the day. With no more work, she was on her way back to the Blue Mountain Quarry. She wanted to get there quickly, to see Luke as soon as possible, but she understood the risk of going too fast. Besides, her driver would hold her back anyway. The crews of both Molly and Skarloey had been informed of the engine's plan, and were happy to go along with it. They even had a few words with Luke's crew, who had no luck getting anything out of him. They were just as concerned for their engine, and were grateful for what Scar, Loey and Molly were going to do. Eventually, after what felt like hours, Molly could see the entrance of the Blue Mountain Quarry in the distance, coming closer and closer. She couldn't help feeling a little nervous. Would Luke admit to anything tonight? Perhaps her and Scar Loey might be too persistent, and make him even more uncomfortable. What if he just lashed out at them? As Molly passed under the entrance, she looked around for Scar Loey. The old engine had some evening work to attend to, but assured he would be back as soon as he could. It would seem, however, he has yet to arrive.
Come on, Scarlowy. Please, be yourself.
Molly continued her approach to Luke's shed. She began thinking about what exactly she would say to him that she hadn't said already. Some words of confidence? Well, obviously, but what exactly? Being an engine of wisdom wasn't exactly a strong suit of hers. All the same, the fact that she was here right now and going to give Luke some company throughout the night was something. Surely that would be enough. As Molly went closer to the sheds, the quiet atmosphere of the quarry was disturbed.
Why do you do this?
The voice was all too familiar. The way it spoke, the fear and rage within it, made Molly tense up.
Luke?
Molly came to a stop just outside the engine shed. Luke's shape could just be made out in the blackness of the inside. Molly could see his eyes, filled with anger, but also terror.
Luke, what's wrong?
I'm sick of being afraid. I'm sick of you torturing me with these twisted nightmares. Why can't I just want to be a normal engine, just like everyone else. Why can't you get that?
Luke, what are you talking about?
Luke didn't respond to her. It was then that Molly noticed that he wasn't actually looking up at her. Rather, his eyes were fixated on the line directly in front of him. But there wasn't anything there, and yet that was all Luke was focusing on. It was as if he was in some sort of trance and didn't even know Molly was there.
Luke? Luke!
Why don't you leave me alone?
Molly blew her whistle several times, but nothing happened. Whatever state Luke was in couldn't be broken. It was then she heard a whistle from behind.
Scarlowy!
The little engine rushed in, his face as red as his paintwork.
Molly, what's wrong? I heard you whistling.
Scarlowy then took a look at Luke, seeing his expression and lack of focus on either of them.
My God! Luke!
I don't know what's wrong with him!
Both engines stared in horror at the uncontrollable rage within their friends as they continued to whistle desperately. Luke glared hard at the shadowy creature that stood before him. Its mocking smirk building anger within him. Everything else around them blackened out. There was nothing but an empty void that they stood within. It was just him.
Oh, now why wouldn't I leave you alone? Because I am you, and you are me. We can't be separated, Luke. Surely you figured that out by now. That little smoke box of yours is where I stay.
You've always been there. Always there to hurt me, to make me feel like a monster, not deserving of being alive. Every time I make a friend, you torment me with the thoughts that they don't care, that they're just pretending to be friends, that it's all fake.
Then how do you know it's not fake?
I know it isn't fake. I'm sure it is.
Are you sure, though? You sure don't sound like it.
I...
And what about Molly? Does she care? How do you know she isn't frustrated with how you tried to stop her for no reason? What if she told the whole island? And now everyone knows that you're just a confused, mad weakling. No, it's not true. And they'll all laugh at you and abandon you. They have no room for some freak like you. You'll be swept to the side and will rust away for always and always. No one would ever want you to work with them. No one would even trust you. Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!
Suddenly, Luke squirmed at the sound of 2 powerful whistles. In that moment, the world around him reformed. The mountains, the tracks, the shed he was in. It was all back. There was, however, something else that wasn't there before he showed up. The sight of 2 familiar and distressed engines.
Skarloey? Molly?
Luke, you can see us?
Luke didn't answer. After all his shouting and yelling, he was now speechless. An uncomfortable silence was what followed, all unsure of how to respond to what they respectively witnessed. At last, Luke found his voice.
How long were you there? Why are you there? What have you 2 been doing here?
Luke had never been so stuttery. It was as if he had been caught in a crime. Skarloey thought carefully of his words. If they were to get anything out of Luke, their approach into this situation would have to be slow and calm. How long it took did not matter.
We came here to see you. We both wanted to spend the night here with you, to give you company.
Skarloey gave a warm smile. Despite the unnatural behaviour a few moments ago, the questioning of that would come later. For now, it was important to comfort Luke.
Give me company?
Yes, we felt it would be a good idea considering everything as of late.
Indeed, having a little bit of company can be nice, especially for someone like you.
Luke looked from one engine to the other. What they said was clearly genuine. It made him realise he never really thought about the fact he slept alone in the quarry. He didn't really mind it, but it felt nice, knowing there were others around him. It made him want to smile. It did make him think, though, about the engines that were specifically here right now. He then frowned as it dawned on him their main intentions tonight. He didn't believe they were lying. They just hadn't revealed their other main goal just yet.
I know what you're trying to do. You want me to confess, don't you? On what's been going on with me. I've already told you, Molly, help won't do anything for me. So why can't you just leave it at that?
Molly felt dejected. There was that tone in his voice again. That sorrowful, hopeless tone. Skarloey, however, became stern.
No, Luke, I will not leave it at that. I won't, because whatever it is has clearly gotten out of hand. You were just yelling and screaming into thin air. Do you really expect us to ignore that?
It's pointless. What's wrong with me can't go away. What's been happening with me doesn't even make any sense.
Oh, why, Luke? Why are you being so stubborn?
Luke glanced at the old engine, seeing the worry as well as the frustration. The frustration, especially, was what Luke feared the most. His eyes began to go glassy.
I'm afraid. I'm afraid of what will happen if I do tell you.
Skarloey and Molly were a little taken aback.
How will you all see me if I tell the truth? How will you know if you'll believe me that I'm not making it up? What if you'll just laugh at me and think I'm a lost cause? How do I know if you won't tell the whole island and everyone thinks
Oh, I'm insane and not fit to work!
Luke slowly started to tear up as he spoke. His vision was blurring too. It made both Molly and Skarloey break up. Whatever it was, whatever had tortured their friend, had pushed him to his breaking point. Skarloey puffed slowly towards the little engine.
Luke, whatever has happened to you won't change anything. We've been friends since the day we met, and no matter what you tell me tonight, we will remain friends.
We will?
Of course. You were clearly hurt, Luke. You've been hurt for a long time. Too long. And we want to end it.
Please, Luke, even if we can't help, can you please tell us what's wrong?
Luke stayed silent, his tears stopping in their tracks. He detailed the expressions of both engines. Suddenly, he didn't feel too scared. He felt lightened. His worries were still there. They couldn't disappear entirely, but they no longer seemed as intense as before. After a long moment of silence, Luke took a long, deep breath. He made his decision. His time of hiding was over.
I don't really know what's been up with me. What I do know is that a part of me, in some way, it lives inside of me. No one can see it, but only me. The first time I saw it was in the steamworks, just after Victor fell into the sea. It laughed at me. It told me that Victor would have been scrapped because of me. It kept on reminding me of it. All my time hiding in this quarry, it never left me alone. When I found out that Victor survived, I thought it was over. Whatever that thing was, I would never see it again. But it never went away. It stayed. It reminded me of what could have happened. What could have been Victor's fate. In fact, it became worse than that. I began having dreams, nightmares, about things going wrong during work. Toppling him off a mountain, on a curve, hurting a workman. They never came true, but they become so real that I can't even risk ignoring them.
Skarloey lit up at this, as if something suddenly became very clear to him. Luke could see it.
Yes, Skarloey, that's what happened with our passenger train. That's what happened earlier with you and Molly. Part of me knew it wasn't real, but I couldn't help it.
So, what happened tonight? What were you shouting at?
That thing, it was here. I guess I felt fed up. That I finally had enough of it. I've grown sick of it. I grew sick of it controlling me. I told it would go away, but it stood there laughing and telling me things I knew weren't true. But I couldn't shake it off. I let it win for so long just to let it fool me. I let it make me believe I couldn't turn to anyone anymore.
No more words came from Luke, as long streams of tears formed out of his eyes. Skarloey and Molly stayed respectfully quiet, allowing this tormented engine to let out pain he had built up for so long. It felt like hours flew by, but no one cared. Soon, Luke looked at his friends as more tears came out.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I just didn't know how to.
Shh. It's all right, Luke. It wasn't your fault. It was never your fault.
But you've told us now, and now we know.
But What now? What happens next?
Skarloey and Molly pondered it. It was indeed an important question. Molly then smiled.
Well, we will stick by your side. If you need assurance, we will give it to you. If you need help, we'll give it as best we can. If you need to say something, we'll mind you. We will listen. If you can't face something alone, we'll face it together. You are not going to be alone anymore, Luke. I promise that.
Skarloey beamed at the yellow engine.
Very wise words, Molly. I'll ensure to do that with you, Luke, and I'll make sure the other engines do so as well.
Luke was shocked.
You would do that?
I wouldn't have it any other way.
Skarloey then smirked.
Besides, compared to some of our engines, you're much more bearable. Don't let Sir Handel and Duncan know that, though. You'd never hear the end of it.
Molly giggled, and for the first time in a long time, Luke gave a long, gleeful laugh. Soon, the engines grew tired and eventually shut their eyes, all feeling satisfied with their efforts that night. Luke had never felt more relieved, and as the hours went by, he drifted off into a deep, silent slumber. No shadowy engine or horrific dreams disturbed him. After several months, he finally felt at peace. Molly and Skarloey were true to their words. All the narrow gauge engines soon learned the truth of their friend. There was naturally some shock, but they were all happy to help in any way they could. Since Luke still feared of the whole island knowing, it was agreed that only the narrow gauge engines were aware. No standard gauge engines or controllers were informed. Paxton's time at the docks came to an end, but Molly requested to spend more time at the quarry, to stick with Luke for as long as she could. Paxton was confused, but respected her wishes and enjoyed the variety in work himself. Of course, Molly did eventually have to go away. She couldn't prolong her time for the main line forever. Understandably, Luke was disappointed, but knew it was necessary. He didn't let it dampen his spirits entirely though. He still had many friends who looked out for him. Every chance they got, the narrow gauge engines would check on Luke, greeting him with whistles and chatter and making sure that if he had anything important to say, they would hear him out. And in the few moments when Luke needed it, they would give him solitude. As more months went by, things got better. After some long negotiations, Luke was given a second chance with passengers. He double-headed one with Rheneas, and despite feeling nervous, managed to complete the entire journey with no grim visions holding him down. He did it so well that should it be necessary, the Thing controller could trust him with passengers alone. Luke had never been more grateful for his friends, his family. After so many years of hiding, after so much torture from within, he finally felt like a free spirit. However, Luke knew it wasn't entirely over. He still occasionally had nightmares that felt real, and although he could tell his visions and reality apart, it didn't mean they went away. Most importantly, that thing, that black shadowy engine, with those glowing white eyes, still lurked around. It still tried to break him, still tried to make him feel useless. Each time it happened, however, Luke would remind himself of his friends and all the support they gave him. Luke hated that creature that watched him, but this time he was no longer afraid. This time he wouldn't back down. Perhaps though, unfortunately, this creature will remain with Luke until the very end. But maybe, just maybe, he will be able to break free from its grasp. I hope so. Don't you?